Postmodern picture books. So you thought that the artistic part of picture book was an innovative way to consider them and to extend meaning past the text part. You may even be planning how to begin now that you have recognized the visual possibilities. Maybe you will have students explore the color palette used by the illustrators. I am guessing you are thinking of starting with picture books that are familiar to you or with an illustrator whom you are appreciated. All of this planning is sounding good and I know you are excited to begin. I also know that once you begin engaging students in visual exploration, you will want to extend your initial forays, just as you move students from literal to inferential and critical comprehension. To help you support in this more complex journey, I shared postmodern picture books that push traditional understanding of the visual and textual aspects. So, postmodern picture books are the results of the illustrators and authors experimenting with form, structure, and tradition. In postmodern picture books, authors and illustrators works against a linear storytelling pattern. Illustrators and authors also ask readers to create the story with them. So to accomplish this task, which is the postmodern picture books, authors and illustrators use four elements in creating these stories. So these are the four elements are the non-linearities, self-referential text, and sarcastic tone, and the last would be the anti-authority attitude. So let's begin with the first element of postmodern picture book, which is the non-linearity. The non-linearity implies that the text does not have a traditional beginning, middle, and end. It also suggests that the reader moves backward and forward through the text and that there may be multiple stories being told. It's a story told out of chronological order. This orientation to the page of a postmodern picture book is like watching children playing on various pieces of the playground equipment while also being aware that others are chasing or playing kickball in another part of the space. All are contained by the boundaries of the playground and all are playing, some children knowing other children and the other games they are playing. But not everyone knows the inner life or connected stories that are sure to be moving through the children's lives. The readers, the authors, and the illustrators, like playground directors, have to move more closely into the play space to understand the pattern and the purpose for the player's moves. So the first example of nonlinearity would be the story entitled Macaulay's Black and White in 1990. This book tells four overlapping stories, each drawn with a distinct visual styles. The four stories are Seeing Things about a boy on a train trip by himself, Problem Parents about sibling whose parents behave differently, One Night, a waiting game about people waiting for a train, and the other Chaos about cows who escape and then return to their field. Um, Macaulay Black and White in 1990 is a classic example of nonlinearity. Readers have to decide whether to read all the four stories simultaneously, follow one story stand, or to move between the four and determine how they are connected. This book requires multiple readings where readers participate in a multitude of reading possibilities. So, in these stories, there are four stories being told. Another example of non-linearity would be the Chester's Back What 2008. These stories begins with this stories is a story about Chester, the cat, a cat who knows what he wants and will stop at nothing to get it. This stories begins with a long time ago in a faraway land and live a cat named Chester. Readers are familiar with this beginning, and the illustration matches it. On the next page, the text repeats, however, the image are complicated, with a crown and Chester's hat flying among other things, and the tail of Chester in the corner. Readers immediately recognize that this is not a traditional stories because the authors and the illustrators and the main characters, Chesters, are changing it from page to page. The cover of this book set up his expectation because Chester appears with his marker and star badge that announce him as authors, but viewers must be able to interpret the illustration to understand this relationship. So, in this story, I will just give a bit summary that this story is really complicated since from page to page ginausob ang ihang kanang concept, and somewhat like similar na po siya sa katong Macaulay's Black and White since kada page man pud kanang sa ka story man pud ato is sa ka libro upat pud siya ka story. So diri pos ka Chester's Back ginausob ang story from page to page yan ang asa na pud ni adto si Chester, somewhat like ang kada sitting sa story is nangausob. So a short summary about non-linearity is that wala siya the story does not have traditional beginning, middle, and end, which is kumura siya conflict and kanang dili siya the non-linearity is not like the other storybooks where there is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is an end. So mura siya kanang gubot ang sa non-linearity na stories. Basta a tip ra to understand non-linearity is ga-consist siya of 4 stories or ang stories gonna change from page to page. Let's proceed to the second element of postmodern picture books, which is the self-referential text that shows the book being created as it is read. This format positions readers to be active and not get lost in the narrative. The self-referential text, somewhat like focus siya sa giunsa pag-create ang libro. Giunsa siya pag-create sa authors and sa illustrators. So, an example of self-referential text would be a book entitled A Book by Jersten, 2009. A book is about people living in a book where one of the character, which is the little girl, tries to figure out what sort of story she's living in. In A Book by Jersten, 2009, readers first meet a young girl on the front flop asking what her story is. The book opens with each member of the family eating breakfast and getting ready for their day. Even the young girl's brother sets off to learn to be an astronaut. The girl, however concerned about her own story, sets off and meets a ghost who helps her find a story. On one page, the ghost tells the girl, "Oh, you better find it." Readers like a good story. Else they close the book. Or else they will close the book, the ghost said. The girl asks, "What are readers?" The ghost replies that she should look up and she will see the readers. She looked directly at the readers and she frightened by their faces. The readers clearly know that they are participants in this story. The characters in the book force this participation throughout, and at the end of the book, the girl even tells the readers to close the book, as it is time for bed. So sa story pa lamang na In a Book by Jersten 2009, we can say that the author really do discuss or really do tell kung yun sa niya pag-create ang book. Another example of self-referential text would be a story entitled Who's Afraid of the Bad Books in Child 2002. Um, in Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Books in Child 2002, Herb is drawn into a book of fairy tales where he visits many magic places and meets several well-known characters. But he constantly gets into trouble and spends most of his time trying to escape from these dangerous situations. So, ang main character ani na book, which is si Herbs, travel siya sa different places or different stories, and meron siya somewhat like napunta siya sa kada line-line na stories, and sa kada punta niya ng mga stories sa maka-experience siya og dangerous situations. Let's proceed to the third element of postmodern picture books, which is the sarcastic tone. Sarcastic tone is common in postmodern picture books since an author may use sarcasm in literature to add humor or cynicism. It can also add variety to authors' writing. Using sarcasm can make the reading more interesting to the audience. Discussed in the self-referential text stories, which is the Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Books. In sarcastic tone also, the Big Bad Books also has a sarcastic tone. So, as I discussed earlier, that the main character of that book was Herbs. So, the sarcastic tone takes place wherein in this story, the character named Goldilocks somewhat used a sarcasm tone while she was talking to Herbs and to the three bears. Last element of postmodern picture books would be the unauthority attitude. It implies the transaction among the readers, authors, illustrators, and text are not straightforward. In this new book, the readers must co-build the framework, supplying missing features of the story structure and pulling together discrete narrative strands. The reader not only enriches and supports the storyline by infusing personal emotions and experience, but also actively create parts of the narrative. In the Stinky Cheeseman and Other Very Stupid Tales, 1992, Cheska and Smith have Jack. The narrator talks to the reader and gives order on what to do. For example, in the introduction, Jack writes, "You should definitely go read the stories now because the rest of this introduction just kind of goes on and it doesn't really say anything." Rather than having Cheska and Smith write the introduction, Jack from the up the hill in the fairy tale forest, Bart's direction and in so doing is critical of the introduction concept. Postmodern picture books. Let's move on to the Sipe and McGare 2008 and Pantaleo and Sipe on 2008. Note 6 major characteristics of postmodern picture books. These are, first is blurring the distinction between popular and high culture, genes and boundaries among author, illustrators, narrators, and reader or viewers are vague. So, blurring is somewhat like the difference between the culture, the popular culture, or the boundaries among authors, illustrators, and the readers. So, it takes place when when writing a postmodern picture books, we should identify the differences on the authors and on the illustrators and the readers. So, let's proceed to the subversion. Subversion is a literacy tradition and convention are identified by challenging a story boundary with the real world, wherein these are somewhat like related to the current situation wherein the author creates a story that based on reality. Intertextuality. Intertextuality um, references to other texts are explicit. Characters from a variety of stories may be included within a single narrative. So, an example of intertextuality would be the fan fiction stories such as A Lord of the Rings. It is a fan fiction that might tell the story of minor characters or add new characters to the world of Middle Earth. Would be the multiplicity of meaning. There is a high ambiguity throughout a narrative and often there are open-ended conclusion. The fifth one would be the playfulness. Readers are invited to play and participate within the narrative. It is somewhat like familiar sa self-referential text wherein the readers also participated in the stories. So the last one would be the self-referentiality. Readers cannot just be immersed in the narrative, they must participate in it. It's somewhat like related Japon siya sa self-referential text wherein the readers really participate in the story. In conclusion, postmodern picture book is it claimed that the postmodern picture books adopts an anti-didactic. So, another addition to that is that to define that postmodern picture book is somewhat like the authors and the illustration works against a linear storytelling process or pattern. Non-fiction picture books. So, non-fiction books, it's about something that really happened or something that really exists. It includes many of the visual elements described, although the relationship between image and text is more typically complementary. Artists and authors share concern about engaging visual representation, accuracy, and reader engagement with the information as these books are created. Example, so before we proceed to its example, the non-fiction book is more on reality based. So, kanina mga stories is based on reality or nangahitabo na sa ato ang live. So, an example would be in Butterflies by Neye 2000 Moroda. The illustrators choose realistic artistic artwork to showcase interesting information about butterflies. The image from this book represents the illustration. So, this is realistic, a non-fiction word itself because butterflies are real. So, it is a realistic. Another explanation regarding to that is that in the book Butterflies by Broda, the illustrator chose realistic artwork to showcase interesting information about butterflies. The image from this book represents the illustration throughout. On this page, the illustrators has created contrasting image of where butterflies live. Children have to infer that this image under colors represents cold mountain and hot desert. So, I have found that some students are confused with artistic rendering of information because they first view them as being narrative even through Broda's drawing are representative of the various places about butterflies and teacher needs to support students in understanding these are facts about butterflies and not a story. Additionally, teachers may need to help students interpret that the artist is representing mountains and deserts and cold and hot geographic regions. So, in Butterflies, it is an example of a non-fiction picture book since the butterflies are realistic and as it is in this book it is described where butterflies live, what are the colors, and somewhat like in reality butterflies do exist. So a second example of a non-fiction picture books would be the Extreme Weather Fenan 2004. A second non-fiction picture books relies on photos, text box, and drawings. Most of the book is written so that two-page spreads carry information and support each other. An explanation regarding to this is extreme weather, a second non-fiction picture books relies on photos, text boxes, and drawings. As seen in this example, the authors and illustrators thought about placement of text and illustrations. For each section of text, there is a text box or visual to complement the information shared. For instance, the map shows where Tornado Alley is in the United States. One text box provided a list of tornado safety tips, with as a close examination reveals a tornado photo as a background. The second text box provides lightning safety types and has a vivid photo of lightning as a background. The last visual is a photo of a tree split in half by the lightning. As I review just the 2 page from this single book, I imagine the rich conversation it can generate among teachers and students. The author helps readers through his words like, "You may not have been seen in a tornado even if you live in Tornado Alley, but you may have been in a thunderstorm." These words are so engaging. They actually invite readers to share their own experience. Students can talk about their experience or share them through visual aids or through writing. Teachers will then want to focus students to examine how the author used visual text to support written text. Why did this illustrator choose photos? What do the photos reveal about tornadoes or lightning? Why was a drawn map used to share information about Tornado Alley? Students may have appreciated what they have learned. So basically, this extreme weather book, it is a non-fiction picture book since it tells facts about a tornado alley where tornado occurs, and lightning. So this book shares facts and safety tips when going to the tornado alley in the United States. So if the children or the students may read this book, they can gather knowledge regarding to the tornado alley even when just they were reading. So it is basically a reality experience. Picture books, students have appreciated what they learned from text, from visual, but they may never have critically thought about the decision and the illustration makes. This discussion provides a backdrop of information that students will use as they engage with other nonfiction picture books, thus deepening their understanding and appreciation of this genre. In conclusion about my topic, as I am going to end this is 2 topics, which is the postmodern picture books and the nonfiction picture books. So, as I will going to end my discussion, I will just have a short recap about my topic. So, my first topic would be the postmodern picture books, wherein the illustrator and the author works against a linear storytelling pattern. Somewhat like these postmodern picture books are fairy tales. So, let's move on to the nonfiction picture books, which is it tells realistic things that are happening in our country, such as the example, which is the tornado alley that the author write safety tips when going to the tornado alley in the United States, and about the tornado and the lightning. It is some information. Makagather taog mga information and in the non-fiction picture books. So, ang non-fiction picture books is based on reality experience or mga reality experience na nahitabo diri sa atwa. So, there are difference between the postmodern and the non-fiction picture books, because the postmodern picture books are written by the storytelling of authors and illustration more on fairy tales or tales, and well, the non-fiction picture books are more on realistic. So, that would be end of my discussion. I hope you have learned something. Thank you and God bless.